I'm Andy Erwin, and this is the Storytellers. Coming up on today's show of the Storytellers, today is one of those days that as a filmmaker, I geek out a little bit. There's very few storytellers that I get completely starstruck with. This guy is one of those. He's a legend and not just in our space, but in film in general. His screenplays have been amongst the most iconic of all time. He's gone on to write and direct amazing things. And so for us to get a chance to do this, when we started the show, we had a list of people we wanted to kind of interview. And we had just released the first few episodes, and this individual texted me and said, "Hey, I would love to be on your show." And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "When can I be on the show?" I was like, "Next week. You can be on the show next week." So today is that day. You know him from the most iconic film of all time, Braveheart. He's the screenwriter for that. He went on to write and direct movies like We Were Soldiers, Secretariat, Heaven is for Real. He was involved in Hacksaw Ridge. He is also currently involved in helping Mel Gibson with the script for The Passion of the Christ Resurrection. He is one of our heroes. Would you welcome Mr. Randall Wallace? Welcome to the Storytellers, my friend. Good to have you on.
Andy, great to be with you, buddy.
Man, I've like imagined the moment I get to sit down and just have an hour of uninterrupted like time with you, because I've just been like, whenever I'm around filmmakers that I respect, I just like, for a lot of us that have gotten into the filmmaking game that are around my age, the two movies that got us in the game were Braveheart and then Passion of the Christ. And you definitely have, ties with Mel and all those things. For you, you grew up in Tennessee though. Like I live in Nashville. Like, Tennessee's your roots?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your roots.
So my parents were born in West Tennessee. My dad's from Lizard Lick, Tennessee.
Lizard Lick.
Lizard Lick.
That's awesome.
And I love to say it. It's just this is true. The men in my father's family are Alton, Elton, Dalton, Lyman, Gleeman, Herman, Thurman, and Clyde. Absolutely true. And
that's awesome. From Lizard
from
Lick.
Lizard Lick, yeah. And my parents grew up out in the country, right in the Depression.
Yeah.
They moved to Memphis when I was 2, and I was born in Jackson, which is halfway between Memphis and Nashville. And and we lived there until I was about 11. And my father had a nervous breakdown, and it was the most difficult time of my family's life. But in some ways, like we find with so many other things, it was ultimately a blessing. It was a gift. My dad had worked full time since he was 14 years old, and Andy, I know you've got a remarkable family history, and our ancestors shape us. The stories about them are the things that tell us who we are and who we're supposed to be. And my dad's father died before my dad was born. So my grandmother Wallace was a widow before she was a mother. And my dad had worked full time since he was 14 and had taken care of everyone. And he lost his job when I was about 11, and he just came apart. It was just too much for him to bear. All that he had carried just he just broke down, and we were in a really rough time with that. My sister and I were farmed out to relatives. We lived in a house with no indoor plumbing for a while.
Wow.
And it sounds so, Baroque. It sounds bizarre to people, but that house was just full of love and courage and faith. And I never felt deprived. I certainly never felt abused. I went to 5 different schools in 3 years. And I think without that, I would have never been able to load everything I owned in a car and drive to California by myself. But we moved to Virginia when I was 11. My father rebuilt his life and became extremely successful along with my mom. And then I went to school in North Carolina, and I went to Nashville for 3 years as a songwriter. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. That was
And you worked at
I
Opryland,
worked at
right?
Opryland.
That's awesome. What was your job there?
Uh, so I was manager of animal shows. Now I was
Okay.
coming out of seminary, Andy.
Uh-huh.
I majored in religion at Duke, and then I did a year of seminary, and uh, and and when I left, it was really difficult because I felt that my friends there were going to go hold the hands of the sick and the dying. They were going to,
Yeah.
be with people in their worst times, and I was going off to do something that I just loved. And one of my friends said to me, "If we could do what you do, we would do it. You
Hmm.
have a gift." And one of them said, "If you don't go, we're going to kick your butt." Uh, and actually, Andy, his name was Andrew, and I named my first son Andrew after.
That's where your son, because I knew your son and I, because your son's a filmmaker as
Yes,
well, and I knew we shared the same name, but I didn't know why.
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Huh.
I named my first son after that guy, and
Hmm.
I went to Nashville. Kris Kristopherson had encouraged me to go to Nashville, and
Wow. Okay, so back up. Where did Kris Kristopherson come into your story? Because you just glossed over that. You're like, oh, this is a guy named Chris.
Okay.
Kristopherson.
See, you are a filmmaker because
Yeah,
you know where
yeah.
you know where the
Yeah, like, wait. Back up there. That's the story.
yeah.
Okay, so Kris Kristopherson entered your life somewhere between Tennessee and Virginia,
Yes.
and you go into Duke. So
Yeah. So what happened was, I was a freshman at school, and I was in an intramural football game, not a D1 football game. I was in intramural flag football game and broke my jaw, or somebody broke it for me. I never saw the collision happen, but I was I was running down the field and somebody hit me and I spun around and then was in a big collision and broke my jaw. And my jaw was wired shut for 7 weeks. And I had an insurance settlement on that for $500. Uh, and and the school had covered a lot of the costs that, so I had this extra money. And
mhm.
I took it and I started a record company.
Hmm.
I had written a song that I had sung around at different school performances, and people liked it. And I started my own record company, and I had a local hit. And about that time, Kris Kristopherson came to school for a concert, and I met him backstage. And and the interesting thing is, he had never heard my music. He didn't know me from Adam, and he was blind drunk when I met
Hmm.
him. But I said, I'm a singer-songwriter. I've had a hit record here in, local hit.
Yeah.
And I really, want to pursue my career, but my parents want me to be a lawyer. And he went, you've
Mhm.
got to go to Nashville. So I love this as an example. Here's a major life decision, and you take the advice of somebody who is absolutely drunk and doesn't know you from Adam. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my
That's,
strategy.
and it changed your
Changed
entire
my
course of your
life.
life.
Changed my life.
That's amazing. I'm just picturing you're sitting there with a broken jaw, Kris Kristofferson, drunk as a skunk, saying you got to go to Nashville and chase the dreams. It's like the beginning of the original Muppets movie. It's just like we're going to Hollywood. It's just, and all of a sudden you're on a bus to Nashville. That's incredible. That's incredible.
It is, and but there's a certain, there are many levels of sort of mysterious wisdom. It seems to me in that, for one thing, as I know you do too, when you're looking for to do something no one else has done, you
Yep.
can't kind of there's no cookbook for it,
No.
but you kind of look at who you admire, who the people you relate to are, and how they have approached their lives. And one of the reasons I admired Kris Kristopherson so much was, first of all, he wrote songs that I found absolutely brilliant. And he was an airborne ranger. He was a Golden Gloves boxer. He was a Rhodes Scholar. And he was the kind of guy that I wanted to be like. I wanted to look at his footsteps and see what I could learn from that. And I related to that. So when he said go to Nashville, I was like, I was going. And I heard about this theme park called Opryland, and I went and I auditioned, and they offered me a job as manager of animal shows. And I had a trained pig who played the piano, and I named him
This is incredible.
Pigarachi. I had a duck that played the drum, and I named that duck Bert Back Quack. 8,000 people a day saw this show. It's one of the most popular shows at Opryland. And
that's amazing.
And I was working like 80 hours a week at Opryland, but I got signed at Tree Music as a singer songwriter, and I worked there for several years. Worked really hard at it. I mean, I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning and write songs every day, and practice and do all those things. But I got, as Jordan Peterson describes now, it's like when you're young, it's good to find out what's too much. And I found that I was cut off from friends, from inspiration. It was kind of hard, Andy, because I've never been a drinker. I grew up Baptist. We didn't drink, but I didn't have any kind of real outlets except work, and that was fine for the training. But I really was getting in a dark place, and I decided I needed to move, and I moved to California. And
wow.
And
how old were you when you moved to California?
25.
25. Well, the thing that fascinates me is there is such a, and I want to get back to the music thing because there's a couple of things from your body of work that I want to point out there. But like, you know, it's fascinating to me is the long incubation time of a really defined filmmaker's voice.
Yes.
You know, I think we all get into this game with a lot of ambition that I want to be the first, and I want to be the, you know, youngest, and I want to be this. But in order to find that moment in time where your skill set that you've been practicing matches the life experience to have something to say, you know, it doesn't come nearly as quick for any of us as we would want. And then a lot of times the people that have something lasting to say, like the Clint Eastwoods of the world, find it later in their career. And it's like, you know, it's that sweet spot for filmmakers between ages, you know, to find their voices between ages 30 and 45, where they do their first kind of film. So you're not even entering the film space. You're moving out to California, everything packed up, age 25, going to be a singer out there.
Right.
So how does this life path you get out there, how does that divert into this film world that you kind of made your career in?
Well,
and did Kris Kristopherson show up at another drunk moment in your life and say, acting is where it's at, kid?
The best movies were the ones that I would walk out of and say, my life's never going to be the same because of what I just experienced. And that's what I thought all art should be. I think Scott Fitzgerald was the one that said, the duty of every artist is to create a masterpiece. So I'm always swinging for the fences. I'm not ever trying to hit singles. I'm trying to hit the ball out of the park. And but music was the way I thought I would do that. And I came out here, I met a woman, fell head over heels in love, ended up marrying her. But when I was just getting to know her, I think it was the first time I ever was invited to her place. I was sitting on the couch, and there was a stack of pages on the coffee table, and had a title on it. And I picked it up and said, "What is this?" And she said, "It's a screenplay, and my dad wrote it." And her father was a bombardier navigator in B-17s in World War II.
Man.
Anyway,
I've just been watching the Masters of the Air series on the B-17s,
yeah.
just trying to understand a little bit of my grandfather's story with the B-29s, and fascinating what those guys went through. So he was a bombardier.
Yeah. And he was a genius in math, and he could work calculus with his face over the Norden bomb site and the top of his head facing the glass nose of that B-17. And the Messerschmitts figured out if you came at him, you shoot at him head on, because if you kill the bombardier, you scrap the mission.
Yep. Wow.
He was shot down and was a prisoner of war for 2.5 years in Stalag Luft 3, which is the camp the Great Escape was pulled from.
Mm-hmm.
So he had this incredible story. And I read this thing, and from the beginning, I thought, this is my art form. This is the format of a screenplay, which is you can tell the audience what the audience can see, you can tell them what the audience can hear, but you don't have to have all these pretentious internal monologues that novelists use and all that. This is it's like the book of Mark. It's like the immediate, here it is.
Yep. This is what happened.
This is what happened. And I loved it. And I thought, I'm going to give this a try. And I sat down one day and thought, I'll just write a page and see how this feels. And at the end of that page, I thought, I got to keep going. I got to see what happens. And it was just natural to me. I've never stopped writing music or singing, but writing screenplays led me into directing movies, and ultimately, like my background, growing up a Baptist, I read the Bible every day, still do, and I thought, okay, Jesus used stories. It wasn't talking philosophy. It's like, here's what I'm trying to tell you in a full, resonant way. This story contains the truth.
Yep.
And that's how I see it now.
I love that. I mean, and Jesus was the master storyteller, because I mean, what he did for his time is he spoke in two different ways. He told parables, which are stories, and then he taught like the meaning behind it, and they were completely separate styles. But he would tell a story that wouldn't fill in all the questions or fill in all the answers to the questions. He would, emotionally engage, take the audience on an emotional, vicarious journey, and leave them with a question. And then the seekers would come and find him afterwards and be like, "What did that mean?" And then he would tell them the rest of the story, and he would teach.
Yes.
But it was those parables that were it was master storytelling. And I think that's, for somebody like yourself, that my faith is very important to me. We're part of a group of people that followed you and Mel and others into battle, and says we want to learn this craft and this art form in order to communicate and earn the right to be heard for what we believe, but in a way that doesn't have to fill in all the answers to the questions. We just want to create the right narrative for people to ask those questions. And so for you, finding your voice, I find that there's something really interesting about storytellers is there's that period of time where all of us have gone through that period of time where we're trying to find our voice. And it's it's kind of like learning to play the piano. You got to just, play, just these simple disciplines over and over again and imitating until finally you can just emote playing the instrument. Mm-hmm. And so, you did a lot of television up front, and that was kind of your bread and butter. I think you were writing a TV series called Broken Badges or something like that I haven't seen. And then all of a sudden you make this massive jump from that, and you got the Braveheart sword on the shelf behind you and the freedom plaque on your, like, literally stamped into your fireplace. Like, you jump from that to one of the most iconic, stories and screenplays of all time, I believe. Like, how do you make that jump? Like, how did you find, like, this is the story, this is my voice? And then, I know it's about William Wallace and your last name is Wallace. Was it tracing any kind of family heritage back to that kind of captivated you? Like, where did you find that story and say, this is the one to tell?
So to jump back for a second to your, to something you said earlier, which I think is really brilliant and crucial. We young people, and I certainly thought this myself, I thought, if I don't have a hit record when I'm 20, I'm over the hill. If I don't have a best-selling book when I'm 22, or if I don't have a a movie when by the time I'm 30, this thing is all over. I was 40 before I sat down to write Braveheart, and I agree with you completely. I think you have to have a great deal of life experience, and the the techniques of storytelling and filmmaking are actually fairly easy to learn. It's the how is not so hard. It's the why that takes a long time to learn. And I needed to learn the why in my own life, and the why of telling a story. I I had started to have some success in screenwriting with screenplays, um, and I was writing novels also, and had a couple published, major New York houses, but the books weren't really selling, uh, and I'd gotten married to this woman whose father was had written the screenplay, and and she wasn't really eager to have children because she had a great career going, and she was reluctant, and we had a negotiation, and it basically boiled down to, if you get me pregnant, you have to take me to Europe. And I went, done. It's like,
done. I'm in.
I'm in. And we didn't have any money, but we were very frugal, and so we were pregnant. She was about 4 months along, with Andrew, my first son, our first son, and she had ancestors. On one side of her family was Irish Catholics, and on the other side were Mormons. And she knew all of her family history back hundreds of years, and I didn't know any of mine. We were just Tennesseans. That was as far back as I needed to go. I was proud of it, and
it all starts and ends in Lizard Lake.
That's right.
Yeah.
Here we are, man. And she, but as the baby was coming along, I thought, well, I'd love to be able to share with him what some of my history is. And we were in England, and I said to my wife, uh, I hear that there are Wallaces in Scotland. Let's go up there and see what we can find. And she went, sure. And we were in Edinburgh, and we walked into Edinburgh Castle. And there, on one side of the entry, was a statue of a man named Wallace. And on the other side was Robert the Bruce. And
and everybody at that point knew who Robert the Bruce was. Nobody really paid attention to William Wallace.
Exactly. Yep. I knew Robert the Bruce from history, and had never heard of William Wallace. And I asked a guard there, who is this Wallace? And he said, our greatest hero. I said to the guard, I know about Robert the Bruce. I know he fought the English. So was William Wallace an ally in fighting the English? And the guard said the magic words for any screenwriter. He said, no one will ever know for sure.
Wow.
But our legends say that Robert the Bruce may have been one of the ones who betrayed William Wallace to clear the way for himself to be the king.
Wow.
Yes. Now, see, exactly.
So, yeah, that's where you lean in and you're like, I'm full of questions now.
Yes. It said to me, it was like a bolt of lightning struck me, Andy. It was like, I had heard that St. Peter and Judas were the same person. Like, how could this? Robert the Bruce is the greatest king of Scotland. He was brave, but if he had done something so awful as to betray the greatest hero of his country, what if there was something so noble about the life and the death of William Wallace that was what transformed Robert the Bruce from a betrayer to a hero? And that was the whole Christian story to me.
And it's redemption. That's redemption. I mean, it goes back to, the Apostle Paul in the Bible. It's the idea of how can somebody go from being the villain to finding redemption and becoming the hero. It's like it's the hero's journey right there. And the idea of instead of just telling Robert's story, to back up and tell the catalyst for that with William Wallace was like, that's the instincts of a really great storyteller.
Yes.
Of being like, no, it's not all this. That's not the story. Everybody knows that. It's this. It's this idea of we may never know.
Yes.
But legend, it's like, okay, I'm in. I don't care what you say after that. I'm in.
Yes.
So you start doing this story, you dig into it. Like, the thing that I want to ask you about it is, I think simplicity that you talked about, like the disciplines of the how is something that somebody can learn from textbooks. But the discipline of a great storyteller is distilling a complicated story down to its most simple essence, to the why. Like, what's the why that drives this story? And with Braveheart, I think it's one of the most profound whys. It's on the wall behind you. The idea that you state so clearly in there of, every man dies, not every man truly lives. And the idea of getting it down to that simple why of freedom. Like, how did you discover the why of the story that you wanted to tell?
Wow. Well, you've gotten right to the heart of it, actually, Andy. It's as we find out when we step forward anytime, there's no telling a story or teaching or even loving unless it's authentically in us first. And that was the journey for me. It was 10 years. I knew at the moment I heard that guard say what he said, I knew that this was the biggest story that I'd ever encountered. Well, I can't say that exactly, in that when people would say to me, well, you must have done a lot of research to write Braveheart, I say, yeah, I read the New Testament. So
yeah. Well, and you say that jokingly, but I think, like, the amount of, because you're like us, you float really well between the circles in the industry and also circles in faith. Like, you're comfortable with it. We're the same way. We're kind of bilingual. The amount of pastors I interact with that use Braveheart as a sermon illustration on Sunday mornings is extensive. Like, because there is something biblical about it. It taps into the same struggle that I think the Bible illustrates, on every page.
Yes.
So it is very much a story of faith without it being, something that is inaccessible, but it's all
Yes.
there in its DNA.
And that was why it took me, it was 10 years before I sat down to write it, because I felt I wasn't yet ready, and I couldn't have told you why I wasn't ready, because I felt, well, I hopefully I learned something every day about in growing as a better artist. I had a baby on the way. I needed to feed him. I I I didn't know if it was too great a risk to sit down and write a screenplay, spend all the time that I would do that without any money coming in, and I had gotten a job in television, so I felt that I needed to do that, but I kept looking toward the idea of making movies someday, and I reached a really dark spot in my life. I became an executive producer in television, creating shows. It's really interesting these days now that a series might be, or a limited series, maybe eight episodes, 10 episodes. We were doing 22 episodes a year, and
It's a grind.
and it was like running and with a very small staff, like 3 or 4 people. So it was like running in front of a freight train,
laying track as you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tuesday comes every 7 days, and you've got to be good, and you've got to be disciplined, and
That's amazing.
so I was doing that, and I had a long-term contract with a company, and my salary was increasing, doubling every year. I had 2 sons by this point. We bought a beautiful home because I had a long-term contract, and they guaranteed me an income for years into the future. And so I thought things were really rosy, and I felt comfortable in spending our savings to buy the home that I thought we would raise our family in. And we remodeled it, and we spent our savings, but we knew we had a lot of money coming in, or so we thought. And then there was a writer's strike, and the strike went on for almost a year. And at the end of that strike, the company that I worked for went under.
Wow.
And suddenly I was without prospects, without money. And I found myself in the same place that my father had been in when he had.
That's where my mind went to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that 11-year-old experience that you saw with your dad.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
And I got all knotted up, Andy. I got to the point that I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't eat, and I certainly couldn't write. And work was the way I'd always gotten myself out of dark places. And I got down on my knees, which was the only place I had to go. And I said this prayer. And the prayer was, Lord, what really is first in my mind now are my sons. And I don't want them to see me come apart the way I saw my father, but maybe that would be best for them. Maybe they'd become better men if, instead of growing up in a beautiful home in Encino with 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms and a tennis court and a swimming pool and German cars in the driveway, maybe they'd be better men if they grew in a little house with no indoor plumbing, the way my sister and I lived when our father lost his way. But if that's what you want for my sons, then bring it on and help me bear it. But if I go down in this fight, let me go down with my flag flying, not on my knees to Hollywood going, what does Hollywood want? But standing up with my flag flying, fighting for what I believe. And I got up and went back to my desk. And that's where they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom comes from.
People perceive us from the outside a lot of times, and they see, and like obviously, Randall's had all these successful movies, and has both written and directed, and had and he's the guy that wrote Braveheart, but they don't understand the dark night of the soul moment that usually comes before you find your voice. And for us, it was with I Can Only Imagine, we had just come off of a film with Woodlawn that I was proud of, and it didn't perform. And I was at a point where I was like, if we fail on this next one, I may have to give up this career. And it came to that moment where you do get to this place of abandon. It's really powerful as a storyteller, where you're like, you know what? I'm going to let go of the boat, and I'm going to swim. And if we drown, we drown. But I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to go for it. And
yes,
there was that moment with I Can Only Imagine. That was our breakout moment that came on the back of like, this may be it. But if this is it, then it's been a great ride.
Right.
And I think that's when you make your best decisions. So for you, you finish the screenplay. At what point does Mel come into the equation as the director? And what was your memory of the first moment kind of meeting Mel and him being the one to take on the story that you've crafted?
So it's a really interesting journey here. I had pitched the idea of Braveheart to Rebecca Pollock, whose name is now Rebecca Pollock Parker. She's the daughter of Sidney Pollock.
Sidney Pollock, yeah.
Who's of course one of the all-time greats, and
he's great.
And she has her dad's talent. She was, I think, in her 20s when I met her, and she had said, "What do you want to write?" And I told her this. In about 5 minutes, I told her just the Braveheart story, and she went, "Go write that. Go write that now." Yeah. And I went, "Well, would you want to see an outline or something?" And she went, "Go write it." And so I had written it, and she called me up and said, all of the assistants in the company, this was MGM at the time, that all all the assistants in the company are sitting around at their desk weeping. And I go and say, "Oh, you just read Braveheart, right?" And they go, "Yeah."
Wow.
And she said, "I've never seen this happen." And she said, "Who do you want to go to?" And I said, "There's only one guy that I believe could play this role, and that's Mel Gibson." And so we sent in the script, didn't hear. And then my agent called me and said, "Are you sitting down?" And I go, "Nah." And he goes, "Man, maybe you want to sit down. Mel Gibson wants to have breakfast with you tomorrow morning." And I went,
Man.
"Okay." And look, I played it cool, but I understood that, he's the biggest star in the world, and I'm a completely unknown screenwriter. And so I walked around the neighborhood, Andy, and I'm a praying man, and I said a sincere prayer, "Dear Lord, help me not kiss his butt."
That's awesome. It's such a great prayer.
And it's because I'd been around enough celebrities to know that there's this valence that people it's like you're being around a king and you go, "I want to tell him whatever he wants to hear." That's the seduction of power. But I realized if I'm doing that, I'm not only of no value to him, I'm no value to myself. I've got to tell him I see the truth as I see it. And so we go into the Four Seasons. We're sitting there, and everybody in the whole place is aware that Mel Gibson's there, and he's there with the president of his company, and then the chairman of the movie studio was there, and then Becky was there, who was the executive vice president of the studio, and me, this totally unknown, and I could just tell everybody is nervous. And Mel broke the ice. He said, "William Wallace and Randall Wallace. So is this guy a relative, or how'd you come to the story?" And Andy, in 5 minutes, I was like a Baptist tent revivalist. I was leaning over the table, pounding on the table with my fist,
acting it all out.
And I said, "Look, here's how it is. Let's cut through all of this crap."
That's awesome.
Every movie has a message, a message, an underlying message, and whether it wants to have one or not. And the underlying message of most movies is the guy with the biggest biceps or the bluest eyes or the cutest dimples and the greenest money, he gets the girl. That's what most movies say. This movie says, if you're faithful to your heart, even if they cut it out of your chest, you prevail. Now, that's the movie I want my sons to see. That's the movie I want to see. You want to make that movie? I'm your man. You don't want to make that movie? You need to say no.
That's drop the mic and just walk away. That's so good.
And I'm telling you, everybody around the table went.
That's cool.
And Mel went.
He leaned in.
And I went, he's in. He's the guy.
That's amazing.
But he didn't say yes. He didn't say yes. He wouldn't say no, but he wouldn't say yes. And we left the Four Seasons, and nobody would look at me or talk to me. It was weird. I was like, gosh, I've really messed up here. And my phone rings in the car, and my agent goes, "What the heck did you say?" And I start to alibi, Andy. I'm going, well, somebody needed to say something. I mean, we're sitting there like bumps on the ego. No. The studio chairman just called and said, "I want to double Randall Wallace's deal, and I want him to direct the next movie he makes for us."
Wow.
And that was Man in the Iron Mask. But
wow.
But
well, and it kind of goes back to that that line in the movie between William Wallace and Robert the Bruce where William says, "I see strength in you." And I think for somebody that is, there's a big difference in the industry between movie stars and storytellers. And I think Mel is a storyteller.
Yes.
He's not about the glamour and all that. He leans in when it's like, that's the story.
Yes.
And there's something about when you portray like, forget all this, I'm not here to impress you. I just want to tell you the story I want to do. And it's not about trying to placate their ego. It's about really just saying, are we aligned?
Yes.
and they respond to that strength like Mel did to you in that moment. They lean in. The right ones do. Movie stars, they're interchangeable, but really defined storytellers,
Right.
they lean in.
Yes.
And Mel's one of those.
Yeah.
For you guys, when you guys stepped onto the set together, there's a beautiful alliance between, a writer that has crafted this story and the director that interprets it. What was on the set? What was the chemistry like, or and you guys had really backed yourself into a really substantial corner, because the things that you guys were trying to do at this were on an epic Cecil B. DeMille kind of scale. Like, how did you guys interact as you guys made the movie together?
Initially, with the filming, it was Mel and I worked together. He asked me an amazing question when our first work session, when we sat down to discuss the script the first time. He said, "Tell me everything you cut out." And I thought, boy, what a brilliant question that is. All the
Wow.
other things that I had written and he thinks that way. He has well, let's just imagine everything we can imagine before we start to edit and hone the through line. I'm always looking for the through line, because my mind, I kind of see a ton of possibilities, and I'm looking for no. That's the one that grabs my heart.
Yeah.
And so initially, I was very quiet and sort of in the periphery. And then it would be when there would kind of be I don't want to say you lose your way, but sometimes you get confused, or you think, I'm not sure which way to go. And then Mel would say, let's talk about what we're doing. Or even in the editing process, the first cut of the movie was over 4 hours. And and some people were throwing up at the end of the.
Oh, yeah. I heard the original ending. It showed you feel it every bit as much in the final cut, but I heard in the original, you saw it, and like people didn't make it through.
Yeah, when as the filmmaker, that red mass is just quivering jello.
Yeah.
It's not hard for you when you think it's a human liver.
Well, when you add sound and all that to the moment, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. Yeah, I heard there was some adjustments.
There were some adjustments, and that was where we really bonded even more, because it was it was a it was a great opportunity to collaborate. And I'm not trying to say I direct any of Braveheart, but the opportunity.
But between like, there is an interesting dance that does require dance partners. Your dance partners.
Yeah.
And so I think that when it's done well, both individuals should have their fingerprints all over the final product.
Yeah.
And you could see that, and that's where I wanted to kind of switch gears with that as we kind of begin to land the plane. I could talk to you for 4 hours, by the way. I'll go until you pass out. But you go from doing this movie with Mel, and then you step into the director's chair with the man in the iron mask, and then ultimately you come back to Mel with We Were Soldiers.
Yeah.
That then now you're in the director's chair. He's acting in the movie. It's a brilliant movie. What was it like to transition to now you're the director and Mel's acting in your movie? What was that like?
I have to give him enormous credit here for his attitude as an actor and his professionalism. I think a great movie comes out of a great family of filmmakers, that everybody on the crew has to own that movie. They have to be invested in that film. And I really wanted that for We Were Soldiers. I had the guys who had lived through Vietnam, or their parents had. Even most of the extras in the movie were former military, and their dads had been in Vietnam, and they had seen how the world had treated their dads as Vietnam veterans, and they knew we were there to tell their story truly and fairly. Mel really, here he is, the Oscar-winning director of Braveheart, and he's acting with me, and he didn't try one iota to grab the director's wheel. It was like, what do you want me to do? That's what I'll do. As you know, the loneliness that you can feel when you're directing, when you're responsible for this, you're the father of this whole great family, and you feel responsible for everyone. And Mel and We Were Soldiers was there for me. Ultimately, there was one scene at the very end of the movie, or for the climax of the movie, in which we had changed the whole setting of where we were. We had been in a one location for 8 weeks, and now we were going to shoot another scene, and I had changed the orientation of the scene. So it's like the whole time we had been, so the Vietnamese are up there, the Americans are here, everybody understood that orientation. But in this new location, to get the helicopters coming in right and all this, I had to shift it around. And I saw it, Andy. I think, oh, I know exactly how this will go. You'll be here. You'll be here. The helicopters will come in. The explosions will come in. We had charges and everything ready to go off.
Yeah.
But I was the only one who saw it. Everybody else kept trying to fit it into the mental model of, but wait, the Vietnamese are over there. It's like, no, they were, but now in this setting,
it's in movie world, it doesn't matter where practically it is, as long as what the lens captures,
yes,
you can make the audience not think about it makes sense to them. You're good. It's what's in the lens. It's not what,
yes,
yes,
exactly. So we had the whole, everybody is there. All of the actors are there. All of the stuntmen, helicopters are coming in, explosions are going to go off. And I'm the only one that understands how it's going to work. Everybody knows you do this and you do that, but they're looking at me like, but this doesn't